Why does operating system matters? Most of the time, coding is platform independent, meaning whatever works in your Windows laptop is going to work in Linux as well as Mac OS. But then why does all this developer go behind Mac OS or they have preferred operating system, maybe Linux, maybe Windows, or maybe whatever the operating they might be using? That's because people have preferences and people like to work in certain way, and this is different for many people. That's why all these operating system exists. In last few years, I got this opportunity to work in multiple operating systems. That would be Linux, Mac OS as well as Windows. So let me share you how does development works for your coding projects in these three operating systems. So now let's talk about Linux. By far, Linux is probably the best operating system to set up your coding environment. You just go ahead and install Linux in your system, and once you install Linux in your system, then done. There won't be any kind of good gaming. Yes, there might be some small games which you might get addicted to, but there are no big games, so obviously you are not going to install it. That's big benefit for coders. And another thing is, setting up anything on Linux is not like how you do it in Windows or any other operating system. Setting up any kind of environment is usually done using command line, but there are like lots of application which you can go ahead and download. For example, Android Studio and VS Code or some other coding environment. But it's always preferred that you should use terminal and install some things, or maybe even set up some environment variables and all. That would be in your bash or whatever the shell you will be using. So this is one of the benefit that whatever you are going to set it up and whatever you are going to release on production will be pretty much same, because in production level always Linux is used. So now you might ask, like, all these are benefits, what are some disadvantages of using Linux? By far in coding there are no disadvantage in Linux, because it's so good to develop in Linux. But problem comes when you are using some weird distribution, maybe Arch Linux or maybe some other Linux version, and that time some things might not work. In order to figure out how to make it work, you might have to go ahead and like search lots of places which people might not even like found the error yet. So because of that, Linux is always on cutting edge, so you should always make note of that to be on stable version of any kind of Linux. So that's one thing. Another thing is, there are some softwares which are deliberately not available on Windows. There are Adobe products which are not available, and even Microsoft products are also not available. So because of all these products not being available, if you are a programmer as well as maybe video editor or maybe some other graphic designer or something like that, your Photoshop won't work in Linux. So there is that. But there are so many alternatives available. I have made videos on that. I'll link it in the description, or you just go ahead and search in my channel for alternative softwares in Linux. You will get it. But there might be some case that you have to use those proprietary softwares which won't be available in Linux most of the time. Now let's talk about MacBook. So in MacBook, it's always being on premium end. There won't be any kind of problem. If something is going to work, it's immediately going to work and it won't give you any kind of problem. Maybe installation of VS Code, maybe installation of Node.js, or maybe installation of something else. You will feel like you are on Linux only, but on steroids, meaning you will get lots of benefit which you might not get in Linux, plus the benefit which are specifically for Mac OS. Maybe developing application for iPhone, or maybe having those access to those proprietary software which I spoke a while back, because most of these companies will release product on Mac also. So there is added benefit that you are going to use those softwares, including the features which are available in Linux. So there is that. But one thing is, if something doesn't work on Mac, then there is high chance that you might not find answer for it. There was one time when I tried to install VirtualBox, and the moment I installed it, it was not working. And after so many tries, this, that, and all, I got to know that it's problem with the VirtualBox itself, that they are not supporting Mac OS, which I had upgraded it to. because it was stable and it asked me to update. So I updated it, and once I updated it, it didn't work. Maybe for 1 year I had that problem, and it was very bad problem to have and be in. So not using virtual machine was one of the biggest problem which I faced. They have fixed it, but again those errors might come in future. So when those error comes, you just have to wait for developers to fix it, and you can't do anything about it. There is that. But if something works fine, it's going to work fine, and you won't be facing any kind of problem. You just open your laptop, open VS Code, and code whatever you want to code, and you don't have to worry about setting up some things, or like making sure something works or not. You don't have to worry about anything. As long as it works, it is going to work like amazingly, because it's that much premium device. It comes in like very high specification, which is going to overpower whatever you're going to code. There won't be any kind of such coding which involves that much power usage, other than running emulators and all. But those are used for running emulators, not for actually coding. So there is that. But unlike Linux, Mac OS requires a Mac hardware to make it work. So Mac hardware is always costly. So you need to think about it before purchasing, that whether Mac OS is worth it for you or not, especially for coding. So another operating system which I used recently, that is Windows. Let's just talk about that particular thing. And regarding Windows, I am actually using Windows 11, and I haven't used Windows 10 that much. So if I want to talk about Windows 11, most of the things works fine in it. There won't be any kind of problem. But the problem is only that Windows uses entirely different architecture that other two operating system won't use. The idea of Windows in order to use something like a terminal is, so you need to install a Windows subsystem for Linux and use that particular thing in order to get features which are available in Mac OS and Linux natively. So there is that big problem which some developers might face. For example, some things won't work directly. Maybe if you are used to working with maybe SFTP or rsync, all those things might not work natively. Yeah, there are things which you can use to make it work properly, but most of the time by default it won't work, and you are going to face lots of problem. That's why I recommend using Git Bash, which is going to solve your problem a lot, instead of using those PowerShell or something like that. Other than that, I didn't face any kind of problem or weird situation in Windows. Yes, but there are some crashes which might occur frequently at random times. That's Windows problem. You can't do anything about it. But other than that, it's fine. So now to the main point, which in this particular operating system is best. As I said, it's actually preference, that whatever you prefer, I might not prefer, and whatever I prefer, there is no such thing that you have to prefer. That's why different operating system exists. But if I want to talk about my preference, I would prefer to use Linux. But just in case if I want to use some kind of proprietary system, I'll stick to Mac OS, because it's going to help to explore both worlds, as well as even Mac OS has its own native restriction, like you can't build iPhone application in Linux as well as Windows. There is that problem. So by that problem, I would prefer Mac OS, because it's going to help to stay ahead of the time most of the time. If proprietary softwares are not my cup of tea, then I would stick to Linux, and I'll be using it. At the moment, I have only one laptop, and that is running Windows. But if I'm going to buy some other laptop, then this particular laptop is going to be moved to Linux for sure. That's it for this video, guys. If you want to see more videos like this, here is video. So that's all. See you in the next video. Bye bye.